one, and we'll stand for the pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I felt like the heat was on in here, so I opened the windows. If it bothers anybody, just pollen gets all over you or whatever. All right, roll call.
Brandy Pelletier.
Carol Locke.
Jason Henry.
Eunice Landry.
Pam McLeod.
Heidi Cooper. Lila Atkins. Karen Curtono. Eliza Burley. Ian Pierce.
Okay.
Jay Fitzpatrick.
Jay is here. Sharon is here. Jim will be here. So I'll open up for our first public input. Does anybody have public input? No? Seeing none, I'll close public input. Agenda review.
Make the motion to accept the agenda as presented.
Second.
We do? Okay.
We need one.
Under,
Personnel. You talking about for reappointment salaries, that kind of stuff, right?
okay, something that was in the packet. Okay. Okay. Personnel? Okay. Legal? Okay. Okay, thank you. All right, any other additions to the agenda? Okay. All those in favor of the agenda?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Make a motion to approve the minutes of May 3rd, 2022.
Any discussion?
It was noted that I arrived virtually at 7:30, but I'm pretty sure it's a lot earlier than that.
You were online.
Yeah.
I think we just didn't recognize you. You were here.
You were here, I think. You were not.
I was
that
here
far.
near the beginning.
Yeah, I thought so. You just, I didn't realize.
Maybe
you
it's a
were
typo.
on.
I just don't think we acknowledged you for the computer. You were here.
I didn't see you when you first got on the computer, so maybe that's what happened.
Yeah, I didn't hear.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't 7:30. I don't know what it was.
Okay. Any other changes to the minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Right. Tim, we have a letter from Alton on the table. When would you like to take care of
Four,
that?
yeah, I'll email and then versus the alternate board for a phone call tonight at the meeting next week officially, but it's something I'm gonna need feedback on before next week, so you'll get an email from me by Monday.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay, report of the Finance Committee, we have the expenditure report and the end of year surplus report.
The Finance Committee met this evening prior to this meeting, reviewed the expenditure report, and asked for some follow-ups. We've got a few things that have not been encumbered yet, such as unused sick, so that's going to affect the balance. Also, we wanted, in anticipation of the next budget meetings, a detailed explanation of our legal costs, because they are significant.
Okay.
Based on information from Heidi, she anticipates that our estimated fund balance will be around $350,000.
action items, and they're on the other packet on the table. It's kind of below, it's right here.
No, that's mine.
Oh, well, that's the same copy I have.
All right, then I'll just give,
Do you want to see it?
no, I've got it, I've got mine from the finance committee. I just say that we actually made a motion just to bring this to the board.
Okay.
We had a lot of discussion about it, so I'll leave it up to the full board to have a discussion when we get to the action.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions on finance committee reports? Okay. Buildings and grounds committee, capital plan update.
Yes, I'll cover that. I have been invited, well, if anyone wants to come with me, to visit with the Alton CIP committee. Looks like in August. We haven't scheduled a date yet, but keep you informed. We'll bring both the 5-year capital plan for the high school and for ACS to that meeting. I don't see anything in next year's plan that would lead to capital item warrant articles. I think that's consistent with the approach that you all took this year. I know it's a little early to be talking about that, but we'll get a little more in depth. But that's where we are. We've been revising the capital plans with Sean and Andy over the last couple of months. It's something that I wanted to try to have done this year by the end of June, simply because last year all the CIP committee was looking for a capital plan presentation in August, and I had been on the superintendent for about 5 weeks. So this year, it'll be good to be ready.
Thank you.
I have a question. When does the capital plan come to the board? That was the last time we
Yeah,
saw it.
so we'll bring it to you in August. We'll have to. The ACS one hadn't been updated in a couple of years, but we're working on that, like I said. And then we've got living documents for both Barnstead and Prospect. Prospect now will be our 3rd time around with it, and obviously we've been working on it for almost 2 years.
We have in the packet the JMA meeting schedule for next year on the lavender paper. Continues on the first Tuesday of the month at 6:30 p.m. Any discussion or comments on that? Everybody good with that? The New Hampshire School Boards Association call for resolutions. I can cover that a little bit. If the board or members of the board have anything they would like to present to the School Boards Association for their annual resolutions, they moved their schedule up starting last year, I think. So they're meeting in the fall rather than in January, and that's so that they can have the resolutions adopted prior to the legislative session each year. So if there's anything that anybody would like to bring forward as a resolution at the state level, we can do that. I think they're due in July though, sometime. July 15th, okay. All right, typically we don't have anything, but if you do, let me know. Superintendent's evaluation. I just wanted to make a note that the 3 board chairs, Alton, Barnstead, and the JMA, are all working together on the superintendent's evaluation process. So we have met and discussed it, and then when school's over, we'll meet with Tim and things have calmed down a little bit and meet with him. We don't expect any portion of this to be a public process, but we did want to thank everybody for the input on the survey that we put out to all the staff at each of the 3 schools, because we do read it and look at it very carefully. So we thought it was a pretty good process and appreciate everybody's input. On to the student representative report. We gave Grace a bye so she could go watch the softball game tonight. So I don't know if she had anything, or we have anything we want to report from the kids' perspective.
Kids' perspective?
School's almost out.
Yeah, there's things that are within my report that I think cover both kids' perspective and
Okay. Okay, great. Do you want to move his report before shared services? Yeah, let's let, Jay, why don't you go ahead with yours?
Okay. Good evening, everyone. There's been a lot going on since the beginning of May. We have a lot going on for the next couple of weeks as well. Prom was great. Kids behaved wonderfully. We had a minor setback, which I'm sure at this point you've heard about. Regardless of whether the boat went out off the dock, it did matter. Kids had a great time, and we were making jokes the whole night that I don't even think the kids would have noticed had we been moving. It was great. It was awesome to see the kids having a good time and being kids again. The musical, we hosted Little Shop of Horrors. We had good size attendance 3 nights. I went to Thursday night showing and Saturday night showing, and both nights were not a packed house, but it's tough to pack that house, even on the best shows. But it was great. Kids were psyched. I popped in often enough to see bits and pieces of the show while they were practicing and dress rehearsals, and communicated a lot with our director, Megan Dale, who was terrific. Thanks for the recommendation. Kids loved her. They adored her. They clicked with her right away. She was fantastic. Her and her husband Joel built sets, built props, did everything that you would expect a director to do. Megan brought in a musical director, Kat Martinez, who was a graduate from Prospect as well. Put on some great performances while she was here. The feedback and talking to the kids, I already got emails saying, she has to come back and direct next year. It opened my eyes up to an experience that I had never had before, and I can't wait to continue to do this. So it's everything that you hope to get out of a co-curricular opportunity like that. So it was great. 8th grade information night. Hosted this a couple of weeks ago. We had more people come out for that event than I think we've ever had come out for an open house in the fall or an 8th grade information night. I don't know what prompted it. I don't care what prompted it. It was awesome. The energy in the building, we talked about it all day on Friday about the buzz and the energy that was in the building that night.
My daughter said she even liked you, but I said, hold tight.
It might change. Yeah, it was awesome. I spent more time with the parents and the kids at the beginning, after the musical performances by the choir and the marching band, who put on great shows. Spent a little bit of time with them, explaining to them the change in the schedule for next year, as well as a little bit of time about PAC activities. We also gave the graders the opportunity to sign up for PAC activities, so that we don't have to worry about doing so much in the fall. And most of the people that I spoke with were very excited, and that combination of nervousness and excitement, which usually is the ingredients for something special when kids get here in the fall. So we're looking forward to having the classes come up.
And there was a horse here.
I'm sorry?
There was a horse.
A mini horse. A mini horse, yeah. First ever. The senior class trip, weather messed with them a little bit, so they had to split their trip up over the course of 2 days. Thursday they went hiking at Mount Major, and then had a cookout at El Coya. And the report from the chaperones is that the kids were great. And then yesterday they capitalized on going to York Beach and spent the afternoon in York Beach. And then they came back here and actually had what was called Senior Sunset. First day of school this year, they tried to organize getting together for senior sunrise, watching the sunrise together. But it did rain on the first day, so they didn't get to enjoy that part. But there was about 40 of them who stayed last night to watch sunset. And the 2 chaperones that were here said the kids were fantastic, and they spent an hour and 15 minutes hanging out in the front lawn, playing Duck Duck Goose for an hour. And again, feedback from the adults involved was it was just amazing to see them be kids. It was very cool. Tomorrow's our senior day. We have rehearsal, we have the cookout, we have the senior video, we have class day awards, senior awards night tomorrow night. Weather is, who knows? this week. All I do know is that Friday looks clear at this
Yeah.
point. So,
Sunny, I saw that.
yeah, we'll work with that. Usually we practice outdoors on the venue, so we have a backup plan to practice everything indoors tomorrow, and then hopefully transfer it over to the outdoors on Friday. We'll see. I think worst case scenario, it doesn't work smoothly. And best case scenario, everybody still gets a diploma at the end of the night. So, but I'm confident that we'll be able to do it. It's a great class. They're great listeners, and it'll work out well. This Thursday, we're doing New Hampshire science testing with all of the juniors. We're doing that in the morning time. And of course, Friday is graduation. I don't know if I have a specific head count as to who's coming and who's not. Do you have it?
No, we need it.
All right, if you are planning on
So
going to graduation.
I know that Debbie emailed you all. She is unexpectedly out now for the week.
Oh.
So if you could let me know tonight, us know, if you are coming to commencement on Friday, that would be cool.
Where are the diplomas? There was a no.
There's a sticky on there.
Yeah,
We
so
covered.
RSVP only has 2 names on it. So,
Those were the 2 that were unknown, is what I was told.
Okay.
Everybody else had been accounted for.
if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind seeing
Let's
a
do it.
show of hands by those who plan on coming. All right.
Can you tell me what time to meet?
5:15 outside of the gymnasium. Carol's hand was up, Pam's hand.
5:15 outside.
You're gonna just,
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
Not
Will
sure.
that go to either definitely no? All right, I'm gonna put you in the maybe. So Carol, Pam.
The thing to do, Ann, is say yes, and then if you don't show up, it's easier.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
That makes it easier.
Draw an arrow to that side. Okay, thank you. 5:15 for those of you that will be here. We'll line up in the outside of the gymnasium. We will be walking from the front of the building down onto the track that way. So if you'd prefer not to make that long trek, please let me know. You can meet us down there. Just hop in line. No, we're sitting in chairs in the field. Parents and guests will sit on the bleachers. Kids will be facing the parents in the chairs. Parents and the guests on the bleachers. Faculty and staff will be on the wings of the student section on an angle. Okay. Monday the 13th is the spring sports banquet. Hopefully, by then we'll have, I don't want to jinx it. Our softball team's playing tonight in semifinals up in Plymouth. I have a live stream here, so if it looks like I'm searching Facebook, I'm watching a baseball or a softball game. They play in the semis tonight. If they win, they move on and play, I believe, on Saturday. So, good luck to them. They've had an amazing year, undefeated. Division III Player of the Year, Mackenzie Renner, who's a catcher for us, and Division III Pitcher of the Year, sophomore, California. So, yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
I tried to cancel the meeting so you could go, but.
Well,
nobody would
my
go
son's
there.
team also plays volleyball, and so they had their quarterfinal match tonight as well. So
Oh, you wouldn't be able to go.
they won, so I'll be able to see them play Thursday night.
Okay.
That's what I have for my agenda. I also have some updates. I did pass out or distribute prior to the meeting a document, 2-page document, double-sided. Side 1 is the community service proposal. I figured it would be better to have this conversation now in case there's things that you would like to see added or taken away. We like to communicate with kids before they go away and over the summer as to what community service is going to entail. I intentionally did not mention anything to the 8th grade parents during 8th grade information night because I wanted to have this conversation. So at our last meeting, we decided to remove the 30 hours of community service from the diploma. And so our proposal to you, I've been working in the counseling office with this one, is that we would still like to propose a diploma with a community service distinction. If student completes 30 hours of community service over the course of high school, that they are recognized with a seal on their diploma, much like if they were getting an honors diploma or a New Hampshire State Scholarship diploma. intend to offer at least 4 opportunities throughout the school year, focusing more on grades 9 and 10 because we know that transportation is an issue for them, but we don't want to necessarily close it to upperclassmen who may need or may be interested in it, but our priority will go for grades 9 and 10. And these will be things that we offer, facilitated by us. I have a community service coordinator, and so we will pick and choose what activity we can bring kids to have them participate in. So we can at least get the ball rolling with some of them. They can get their feet wet, determine if there's something particular that they like. And I do not know what the actual activities will be. I suspect anything from road cleanup to possibly snow removal to helping out with the races that they do at the lake, or the things that they do on the ice where the airplanes come in. I don't know what that's called. Those types of events that we can help facilitate and transport. What is that? What is it
Winter
called?
Carnival.
Winter Carnival. You know that.
So you're saying that 11th and 12th graders can still participate, but you anticipate they'll drive themselves? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, our priority is going to be, because some of these events we anticipate being done during school time, and then some of them not during school time. So we want to encourage the younger crowd to get involved earlier, so that if they can accumulate, say, 8 to 10 hours over the course of freshman year, they're part of the way there. So by the time they get their driver's license, they may be inclined to do more on their own independently. As you know, we are running PAC activities. We haven't ruled out the possibility of one of the PAC activities being a community service-minded activity in which that organization will not only do community service, but would also create opportunities for others to participate in. And the third part of the proposal is the paragraph at the bottom. Right now, our requirements of what constitutes community service is pretty tight, meaning that you can't, you in the past couldn't get credit for helping out a neighbor. But we'd like to expand it and allow that to be something that kids can do, as long as they're not getting paid for it, and to the best of their ability, getting that approved ahead of time. If we know that there's a big storm coming in and an elderly neighbor next door needs help, we'd like to be able to encourage and promote that type of community support and allow kids to benefit from it.
I think it's very valid.
Yeah, I like that.
Great, I think it's a great proposal.
Thank you for your option.
Yeah, and obviously we're open to whatever other suggestions you have.
Is there a way to have like something on their gowns at graduation to, just because people don't, yeah, like a cord or something like that, just because people don't see the diploma, and I think it would be a nice visual
Sure.
distinction for the public,
Yep, I like that idea. Yep, I like that idea.
whether it be whatever color you want.
Good idea.
The Kelly Green Honor Award is often given to students who have shown exemplary skill in biological sciences, cultural studies, or community service.
There you go.
Does anyone motion or are we to action?
Oh, sorry, I didn't
So
hear you.
this
in the
idea
process.
of getting out of the diploma
Motion
is
now.
presented to juniors and seniors also, is what I'm assuming.
So, I guess that's the other question. I don't know if you care about this, but we'd like to put this into effect immediately, starting next year seniors. That way, the kids who have performed community service up to this point can still reap some type of
See the
benefit.
value of
Yeah.
having that community.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion that we accept the community service proposal as presented, starting immediately this coming fall.
Second.
Can I just make a comment? I don't know, it seems like there's been some flux with the expectations, so, I mean, if appropriate, I would also allow, or I wanna allow seniors to have it be kind of prorated.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
not,
yeah,
and not
absolutely.
less than 30, because not everyone has the opportunity, and,
And they certainly haven't during COVID as
Right,
much.
and they're just,
So to that, this year's seniors, we said we didn't have to have any because of the disruption. Next year's seniors, this year's juniors, I believe we said to them it was 20 hours.
Yeah.
And thereafter, we increased it, and this year's freshman has 30.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So if we're okay with saying to them it's 20 hours, then great.
yes.
Cool.
Thank you for putting that together.
Any other discussion on this? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you for the support. On the backside of that, to finish up my report, the DEDPAC planning, since the committee was formed, we've been meeting. When we initially got together, we developed FAQs, the frequently asked questions and answers. We shared that out with staff. We asked staff to go through it, pick it apart, look at it from the optimistic view and the pessimistic view. We made tweaks. We continue to make tweaks to it. And it's a working document, but it's in a very good place right now where we feel that we have a lot of answers to obvious and less obvious questions. I fully anticipate there being things that come up that we go, oh, we don't have a plan for this one, and we'll figure it out as we go through it. First time out, that's going to happen. We've presented at several staff meetings. We solicited feedback from the staff. We've provided regular updates and opportunities for them to contribute, to participate. We worked with Tom Rubino, IT director. We came up with a dashboard that people could sign up. They put their maximum and their minimum occupancy, the activities, the items that they need in terms of supplies. And we came up with a method to allow kids to schedule for that as well. The kink is that we can't do that until the next school year starts, until we close out this one. And we're not going to have the kids in the building on July 1 when that new calendar year goes into effect. So like what we did with the 8th graders, we literally had them sign up on paper. We're going to do that sometime next week after we get past graduation. We'll do it with grades 9 through 11, have them sign up on paper, kind of like an arena scheduling where they'll go around table to table, be able to read what it's about, talk to the person who might be facilitating it, and put their name down, and then we'll input that data over the summer. Come fall, we'll begin planning for session 2, in which case we'll have all of the kids in the building. At that point, everybody should be proficient with how Infinite Campus works, and they'll be able to schedule their 2nd through 8th session through Infinite Campus. So, I send out bi-weekly letters to parents. In the past couple, I have sent out, I have referenced the change to the bell schedule. I've supplied folks with the bell schedule. I've supplied the pack time explanation, its mission, its vision, and things of that sort. I've encouraged parents to reach out as well. I've met with every grade level. I've presented the bell schedule as well as the activity and the mission to all of the kids. And in some cases, I got grumbling. In some cases, I got excitement, which I think is par for the course anytime you're going to try something new. And we certainly have given kids an opportunity to ask questions. They'll be able to ask further questions at the point when it's time to sign up as well. So moving full steam ahead, everything's worked out well so far. In the fall, session 1, we'll be offering 32 different activities in the fall. So,
is there something going out to kids, like a flyer on what all the activities are before the sign-up date, just so they have an idea?
I can share, they were shown that when I met with them during the assemblies, but I can certainly put that out ahead of time when I explain to them.
I know that was one challenge for the 8th graders, I think, that there were papers all over the room, but they didn't really know what was at the next table. They didn't have a preview, really, except for the slideshow that they just had, to have information ahead of time to help kids choose.
Okay.
I thought there was a good, diverse selection. Some really interesting things.
very few that we felt the need to be like, no, we can't do that one. Like one of them was, somebody said they wanted to play billiards, and we were like, it would be great to have a pool room in the building, but it's not really in the cards right now. And then other members of the committee they were on Craigslist and Facebook going, oh, we found a pool table for $50. I'm like, no, we're not going to get a pool table. Yeah, there's opportunities for a little bit of everything. It's going to be very surprising if we have kids that say, I don't want to participate in any way, because at the end of the day, you also have the opportunity to sit and read quietly to yourself.
There was an outside reading list that a lot of 8th graders signed up for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be good to share it with parents in advance too, so they can process it with their kids.
That's my update on PAC, update on community service, unless anyone has any questions. I'm all done.
Thank you. I'm going to move Peter's Battlefields of Europe trip up a little bit, so you don't have to sit around until we get there in the agenda. So in your packet you have a very colorful packet from Explorica. Would you like to speak to anything?
No, I don't really. I mean, I just was here to answer any questions you may have. I mean, I've been doing this school for many years now, so it's pretty regular. But if there were any concerns, especially with the events that arose recently.
Sounds like they were fantastic at this last trip that you took this year.
It was one of the best.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so the trip is next year.
I think it's great.
Does anybody have any questions?
Make a motion to approve the Battlefields of Europe trip, April 2023 through April 29th, 2023.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Superintendent's report, including shared services.
So on the table next to your agenda packet, you'll find 3 things. Pretty quick, 3 things. The first is about LEA determination notifications from the Department of Education for this year. So this is something that the department sent out to every SAU this April and May. I've attached a copy of the one for SAU 301, which at the bottom reads needs intervention. And then behind that, you'll see another page attached, and I tried to highlight the field. It was already green, so when I hit it with yellow highlighter, it just got more green. But it shows an error.
Yeah.
Div 0, right? That's an Excel error. So here's what happened. So we got this letter telling us that we were in the needs intervention category, and within minutes I had a phone call from the commissioner saying, don't worry about that letter, we need to have a meeting. So Ms. Gruby and I scheduled a meeting with somebody from the Department of Special Education, and it turns out that during a federal DOE audit of our state's Department of Education, they found that the way New Hampshire has been calculating compliance and counting students as enrolled at schools like Prospect Mountain, the state's only joint maintenance agreement, is not consistent with how the Fed wants them to do it. So they changed their formulas, and as a result, essentially, they're trying to divide by 0 students who reside in the Prospect Mountain catch area because no students reside here. Now, all of our students at Prospect Mountain reside in either Alton or Barnstead. Now that all makes sense to everyone in the room, right? Here's what it means though, and the reason we had to have a meeting with some folks from the department. This is going to change how LEAs operate. We are about to talk about shared services. Conveniently, your the joint board's original memorandum of understanding signed in 2005, somebody here's signature is on it, appoints the special ed director from the high school as the LEA rep for high school students. That won't be allowed anymore. Now, if we move forward with shared services, as you've been planning and talking about now for a couple of years, it won't matter because we're talking about the same person or people anyway. But this would have given the joint board a push maybe to think about that if you weren't already. So I know it came up my first year here, you were having a discussion about LEA rep responsibilities. Now it's been changed by the Fed. This will affect, I think, 3 districts in New Hampshire. You can probably imagine the others. They take a lot of kids who don't actually live in the towns where the schools are located, the high schools. And those high schools operate separately and independently as their own entities, like us. So it means 2 things for us. I'm not reading this all to you, I'm just telling you what it says. You can read it on your own. It means 2 things to us. First, I think that the Shared Services Committee needs to get together with some advice from your attorney and propose revisions to the special ed MOU. Because as it's written, it really can't be used anymore. But functionally we'll be fine. It's something that could be done over the summer and maybe proposed to the board for ratification in the fall. So that's number 1. Number 2, and again, as we move into a world of shared SAU services in special education, this is going to be a lot easier for us to deal with than it might be for those other 2 schools. The grant money that follows students through the IDEA grants will only go to Alton and Barnstead now. So previously, there's been an IDEA/preschool grant for SAU 86 and for SAU 72, and a 3rd one just for the high school. So your special ed director at the high school wrote an IDEA grant and used that money for whatever qualifying purposes it was being used for here at the high school. That money will now be divided based on qualifying student enrollment between the 2 tenants. And in other places where the SAUs are separate and don't share any kind of leadership, they're going to have to negotiate moving that money from one district to another, and I wish them luck. Here, it's going to be pretty easy. We can have the dollars follow the students, and it really won't make much of a difference to us, except we'll be writing 2 IDEA grants instead of 3 IDEA grants and paying for all the same stuff with them, because it should come out to the same amount of money. So that's what this means. Okay?
So since we have shared services, a shared superintendent working on shared special education services, we're not going to be bickering between the high school and the elementary schools on how that money might be spent or used.
These days, the superintendents almost always agree.
Yeah.
Does this have any impact on enrollment school?
No. I think not, and I'll tell you why. That's my first thought. In an open enrollment situation, the base tuition up to 80% of the receiving school's per pupil cost is billed for any student, and additional costs for special education are just that, additional, and get billed separately to the town or catch area or district of residence. So I think that those communities would be receiving their IDEA dollars anyway in that situation, so that should still be the same. Good question. But there are places in the state where there might be 6 or 8 or 10 towns sending students to a high school that does operate separately and independently like this, and I'm not sure what that's going to look like for them, but we don't have to figure out. We have our own things. So in that vein, the next thing you have is bound, and we recycle our bindings, which is why they're not all the same. So you have some red books or some report covers or whatever. Again, we recycle them, so whatever we have. And I don't have those. So there's a lot here. This is since the April 20th meeting of the Shared Services Committee and the pretty extensive update at your last meeting, you knew there was a lot coming here tonight. So I'll go through it. Stop me anytime you want. This is electronic. You can do your public thing with it. You can scan it on the website and all that. I have attached for board members' purposes, there's a little packet slipped in the back, which I am asserting has some pages that are confidential. I've stamped them that way, and that's because one could deduce what health plans different employees take by going through this, and I think that therefore needs to be covered. However, the numbers are all the same, and the numbers are all in the public presentation, okay, the total numbers. So, you all already know that one.
Yeah, it wasn't in the one.
It's tucked behind it. Yeah, it's the next thing underneath it. Sorry, depends. If you had a red one, it's tucked in the back. Sorry. So, starting with the blue presentation, there are a couple of copies on the chairs over there as well. You weren't all here, but you all know at this point that the joint board has been talking about shared services since before I met you. You had your 3 superintendents doing some analysis back in either the 17-18 or 18-19 school years. We have access to those records still and use them in this process. Since 2019, you've asked me and the other superintendents when they were here to do some additional work on this, and here we are. I provided the link once again to the MOU that the boards agreed to back in May of 2020. So this is, I think, year 1 of 3. Year 1 of 3. It has automatic renewals if neither board acts to terminate. And it establishes that in the first year, you would combine superintendents, business administrators, and actually your original agreement was to try to combine special education directors, and then you backed off from that during implementation. And then I think it's Article 5, Section 5 of the agreement states that going forward every year, you'll get together and talk about other areas like food service facilities, technology, and curriculum coordinators or assistant superintendents. The general approach is that you let things come to you, right? Wait for a resignation, a retirement, a change of some kind, and see, just ask at that time, is now the right time? As you already know from recent meetings, all of these things have come at the same time. Almost all of these things have come at the same time. So we're a year behind or ahead, or however you want to look at it, on some of your original intentions, but here we are. So just going through the things in order, and again, I don't like to read to you, so I'm not, but I'm about to read from, or talk about the facilities directors slide, bottom of the third page. As you in Barnstead know, it's been tough to find a qualified and reliable employee to fill the facilities director role over there. We have a really high quality facilities director at the other elementary school, ready for growth. My proposal is that we appoint that person. And we'll nominate him tonight if you'll let us for that role. The financial, so there are two sides to all of this, right? So there are 2 slides for each of these topics. One is, why would you consider doing it? And the other one is, what's the financial impact, right? You'd consider doing it because we have a solid candidate who's ready for a role like this, who's already doing it on an active basis and really knocking it out of the park, just doing a wonderful job. On the financial end, you go from a total of 3 full-time equivalents at about $312,000 a year to 2 full-time equivalents at about $245, savings of about $70,500, and 1 full-time equivalent system-wide, right? So I wrote a note down here that the shared elementary school director nomination should be in your personnel report tonight, and you know what, I may have to give that to you verbally because I'm not sure it is, but we'll get there. I'm going to keep going unless you stop me. Same thing with food service directors. You know, we have a vacancy also in Barnstead, and we have a pretty solid, long-term employee who's done a great job, just finished a degree program that is looking for a growth opportunity. In both of these roles, we did a salary analysis in the region. So I looked at multi-school systems, right? Districts where these people serve more than one school, and found a Lakes region average salary. And that average salary is what we're proposing or trying to propose tonight. And those numbers, again, they're in that packet that you have at the back. So if you look at facilities directors, it's okay if you don't want to, but if you do, you find a shared director proposed at 74,160. If you look at food service, you find a shared director proposed at 70,818. And again, those are just based on market research, which I can share with all of you if you want to, if you need to. I know there's a lot here. If you need to withhold action, if you need to have another meeting, whatever you choose to do, this is your show. IT gets more complicated, and that's why this is a, yep.
Before you start IT, so facilities and food, where there's one person for both elementaries, would you have someone on site who's like the lead, the man, the supervisor, whatever you want to call it, like somebody who's in charge of that person who's on site?
We've talked about it, and in both cases, they've said that they don't feel it's necessary. So I was a little surprised.
So we don't have to.
So it turns out it's not that uncommon, right? This is how a lot of districts are set up anyway. So certainly it was in an earlier model, the first financial model that we did back in April for the committee included stuff like that, but at this point we've been talking to, the potential directors. I've arrived at, I'm not sure what we do. If we find we do, we would certainly come back to you. But again, these two employees are doing this on an acting basis for us already, just for the last couple of months of the year, and things seem to be working.
Is there a reason, or what are the reasons why we didn't consider one director for all three schools?
Yep, we can do that if you want to.
Are you talking about food service?
Facilities and food service.
Yep, so my personal rationale for not proposing that to you in facilities is that there is a lot of elementary school work coming up. And, this is a new thing. So I think from day one, I've been trying to encourage you to crawl, then walk, then jog, and kind of go slowly with this. I know with 5 or 6 potential changes all here at the same time, it doesn't feel slow right now. And to be honest with you, I'd rather not have 5 or 6 all at the same time. But as we've already discussed, as you go through them, it just each makes sense for our situations right now. But so for me, that's the reason for proposing it this way. Certainly, it's something you could do, meaning the joint board, right?
My question is just because this is really an oversight position. And if we're really sharing services and combining services and oversight level of director, it seems like it makes sense to have one.
I don't know what oversight, I think we do it here.
Right.
It's not work.
Well, that's what I want to identify here. What does that mean versus looking at some of the other positions where it is one person for all?
There's a huge amount of paperwork involved when you have a lunch program, just through the federal government you have. I know that our food director in Gilmington spent a lot of hours just doing the paperwork, so to do 3 schools would be pretty overwhelming. Then they have to manage the food services. I think the food service in the high school is very different than food services in the elementary. And that's just it.
They have said that.
Yeah, I think.
We are also, what you're doing, trying to do here is different from a regional district that has 3 or 4 schools, because that district is one SAU, one set of grants, one set of reports. The way we're combining things, you're still 3 SAUs. So instead of 8 grants, we're filing and updating 24 grants, right? Because we have 8 for each of the 3 entities. Same holds true for food service. So all of that paperwork has to be done separately for each school, because we're not only schools, we are districts, and that's not changed.
Yeah, I feel like the facilities director is pretty busy.
I agree.
That's a pretty big job, and I think to take on Barnstead, if we're talking about progression, I think that there's enough on that plate, and I would rather see that person be successful and not be overwhelmed and burnt out and then lose them. I guess it's not.
That's what I was gonna say, we have a lot of things that we cleaned up in Barnstead. So rather than take on 3, just let them take on 1.
Small steps.
Yeah.
We just had a whole study done. There's a lot of work we done on Barnstead,
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
versus going to be
We
busy.
have a huge list.
And Barnstead's application for state building aid will go in by July 1st. And,
Doesn't mean come down the road.
you know,
but-
if
Right,
if
right.
that
I just
happens,
brought it for a discussion.
Yeah.
You know, because I guess it depends on whether we look at it as the first step in an evolution to end up with 1 director. I mean, I think that's something we should be clear about when we start, and also because that also designates what kind of support staff we need in each facility.
so in 2 of the areas tonight, I'm actually going to propose to you that that's exactly what this is, a series of progressive steps. You all have been very clear with me, I think, over the last couple of years, that yes, you're going to save some money, but this should really be about quality, consistency, and sort of integration, right, alignment first. Whatever cost savings come, terrific. And over time, if they get greater, wonderful. But part of going slow is making sure that as we do things, they work. Yeah, these are both areas where there could be a future where there is 1 director for all 3. How soon is that future? I can't predict that tonight. And a couple other areas I'm going to predict that tonight.
But I think one of the things that you said was important, that both of the individuals that are doing this currently are looking for growth. And I think this is an opportunity for them to gain that growth, and at some point they may determine that they can do all 3 schools or would like to, but we're not there yet. I mean, we really need to give them that opportunity to accept this new position.
Well, that's the point of reevaluating every year too. This is the real unknown.
And I think it's based on things that are happening, that
Attrition,
that are
like a
outside
natural
our-
attrition that's
Yeah,
happening,
and
yeah.
When we started this, we didn't want to be firing people. You know,
Same we did the superintendent. We had attrition, move, doing all the positions.
Yeah.
Maybe
so there are opportunities, and we seem to have people that are willing to fill those opportunities.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I actually, that's a great point. I feel fortunate, you know, things worked out differently than you had them planned. But for us to be able to take on Barnstead first and have a year at SAU 86 and then at SAU 72 and Alton afterwards was, I almost can't imagine if we had tried to do both at the same time. Yeah, it worked out. It worked out well. Good for now on those. So IT gets more complicated, sorry. And there are some attachments about IT. So if you go to the end of the presentation pages, you find a whole memo just on information technology. But advantages and disadvantages to combining services in information technology are first, that instead of having a dedicated support technician for each school, who may be out sick or may be busy at any given time, if you share support technicians, then you still have support available, right? If you have 3 technicians for 3 schools, but the others can be called at any given time, right? Somebody's out, it's not such a big deal. The ticketing system, it looks like this. It's a map. And it says information technology shared services planning update at the top. It's right behind the blue stuff. Unless I didn't put it there. It should be. You have it. Okay. There are help desk openings, not in Barnstead this time, but both at Alton and here at the high school. Or there are IT openings. Those of you at ACS on the Alton board know that the infrastructure in that elementary school needs an overhaul, we've learned. So there's an opportunity now to look at consistency of infrastructure, right? What systems are we using? Does it make sense if you have to train support technicians to have 3 different kinds of switches in 3 schools, or could we all maybe have the same kinds of switches? Because they all basically do the same thing, but learning the software to maintain them and solve the updates and know when that needs to be done, just much simpler if you can create some consistency across the system. And then the last thing, and I only put a few down, but is that no one of these schools alone would hire a chief technology officer and a network administrator and a support technician. That's more than any one of these schools with enrollment between 425 and 500 is going to afford. But as a group, you can do that. It's much more realistic. So flipping to those additional pages at the back, this is a draft of the report from Harrington Associates. I told you they were coming in to do an on-site audit. They also did a desk audit after we did our own evaluation. It's pretty fresh. It's about a week old. I have not yet sat down with Adam and Tom to read it, and we'll figure out when that's going to happen, but it'll be within the next several days. You'll also find draft job descriptions for a technology director, CTO, and for a network systems administrator. You won't find a draft job description here for a support technician because that's really not a change. Those already exist in each school. So the Harrington report that you have a copy of there, it has an appendix at the back that proposes a system-wide structure with 7 positions in it. And to be honest with you, that's more than we have been talking about internally and more than we think we need.
It's more than I have in company.
Yeah, it seems excessive.
Yeah.
So what I'm proposing to you is that we fill a CTO position, that we fill a network administrator position to report to that chief technology officer or director of IT, if you prefer. And then we have 3 technicians to provide end user support. That should be enough. 5 should be enough. Financially, it's not a huge area of savings. It is 1.5 full-time equivalents, fewer employees than we have system-wide right now. But one of those half positions is currently grant funded. We did it during COVID at BES, so that would go away probably anyway if we didn't want to add it to the budget. So there's not as much savings here, but again, it's not all about savings, right? It's about 2 things. It's about quality and process improvement and alignment as well. So across the board, it's about $30,000 less in cost to have these 5 employees as opposed to the range of employees we have had. 2 of our current employees have applied for some of these positions, but we have posted publicly as anticipated openings pending your action for both the CTO and for network administrator. And those postings are active now. So how you want to proceed, again, it's a question for tonight for you, and to what degree do you want to empower us to move forward and act, or to come back and have a meeting with you, or those are questions for the joint board. Want to keep going, or do you want to talk about it?
Questions?
I think it makes sense to have all of them shared, because there are times when one school has a push to get things done. And I know in Barnstead we've had to then, hire somebody to come in and help. And this way, the director can schedule those people so that the work at Alton gets done when it needs to get done, and then Barnstead gets done in the high school. But they're all aware of all the systems.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same with my county's done.
Yeah.
They do the same thing.
No, I think this model, you know, you all know I worked at ACS for 10 years, and as a person in a K through 8 school like that, you just wear all the hats. And then in a model, this is similar to Concord's, where you have a director and you have these specialists who work underneath you. It's just a lot less stressful. It's a lot easier to get stuff done. We don't burn as many people out. ACS, I know Alton has been through person after person after person after person, so we'll be able to pay them better. We'll be able to hopefully retain people better. And we haven't had a lot of talk about cybersecurity as a board, but I gotta tell you, districts are at huge risk from losses and liability due to cybersecurity incidents, so it really is important for districts to position themselves well with strong technology, infrastructure, and personnel, because it's just huge. Ask Peterborough, Conval, how much money they lost in their data breach. It was a lot. So this is great. Looks really good to me.
I'll press on. Next area is special education. Your current status is one full-time director of special ed for each school. And what we're proposing tonight is an anticipated 2-phase process of consolidation. So again, on the back of the packet, you'll find another separate memo just on special ed. So this area is the perfect example of this is about alignment more than it's about money. And yes, you save some money, but this is about one system of supports for students, all building toward the same results, right, or the same goals and aspirations at the high school and beyond. So on that memo, we have a vacancy in Barnstead, as you know, so that creates the logical opportunity to look at this. I've been meeting with the 2 directors we employ at the other 2 schools, and you will not be shocked, I think, considering how I've been approaching this and trying to encourage you to hear that my 2-phase plan includes both of them. This is an area where I would not propose that we post and invite people from outside to apply. I think we can do an internal process for this one area because it makes sense. I think that for the next 2 to 3 years, depending on how long it takes to create the alignment and make some of the changes, particularly doing some of the staff development and professional learning that we're going to need to do. For 2 to 3 years, we have a director of special education responsible for the entire system. 1 LEA, which solves all those other issues, right, related to the MOU. And an associate director who focuses on compliance and IEP development processes in the 2 elementary schools. To be honest with you, I believe we have someone among, between the directors we have, I think we have people who are each better suited to these 2 roles. I think we have someone who's perfect. Yeah, so they have to be able to be in all 3 buildings, right? They have to. And we have the space. I mean, one of them would need to be in both elementary schools.
Right.
The other would need to be able to float among all 3 places. And then the other thing that I would add in the first phase would be a team chair or team leader here at the high school, again, to shepherd through sort of the routine annual review processes and things like that. It's very typical in multi-building districts to have that team chair, team leader position be a teacher who still has a limited teaching load. It could be as few as 2 classes instead of 5, and then receives a stipend on top of his or her teaching salary to fill this role. And that stipend is because of time after hours and all that sort of thing that this person ends up inevitably working.
And Tim, as far as the LEA part goes, and I know that there was a new information on that,
So I would allow all three of these people to act as LEA with my authorization, which I'm supposed to put in writing
Okay.
for them.
Yeah, just because otherwise I feel like that person is gonna get really bogged down with a number of meetings and then they're not gonna be able to do their job effectively.
So the next packet you have, and I'm not going to go to it and talk about it, but you might want to leaf through it, is the current version of this comparison. This is information gathered from 8 different administrators in the 3 schools over the last few months, and it compares it's just facts, student services information from ACS, BES, and the high school, starting with total enrollment, number of IEPs. There's a section on 504s. There's a section on who does testing and how much testing do we do, related services, including speech OT and PT. There's a Title I section, which is not part of special ed, but part of student services. There's a section on guidance. And then at the end, it totals up the number of employees in these roles and gives you, I think it's handy to prompt questions. And that's what it's done for me, certainly, is prompt questions. And we've been asking a lot of questions this year. All of those questions point to some of the things that need to be figured out over the next couple of years. And that's going to mean some changes in practices at some of the schools. I'm not the one to make those decisions. You don't want me to. I'm not qualified. Right? It's not my job. It's for the experts. But until there are experts engaged across the system, you're going to have the same situation you used to have in the central office, right? Which is different opinions, and where do you go from there? So there is an opportunity here to move into the first phase of making whatever changes need to be made to create that consistency and alignment. For me, one of the first big areas, and there are a number of big areas. Those of you on the Barnstead board know the system of behavioral supports in that school is critical in my opinion. And I'll stop there and again let the experts take over. But that has to exist. And we have that expertise between these people already here. So that's one thing we could get out of this process. Another is, and we've talked about this here at the joint board level at the high school for the last couple of years, is how to move toward, you hear the word inclusion from your special ed directors a lot, but it means different things to different people. There is a legal definition of inclusion. What I ask is, how much of our service time do we spend in the general classroom as opposed to pulling a student out of the general classroom? And it turns out that our practices in that regard in the 3 schools are all very different right now. So there's just an area for professional conversations among our staff across the schools, and then some alignment. And it should be based on a philosophy that, quite frankly, our special ed leaders should be coming and talking to you about. Here's a philosophy. Here's what we propose is the way we do things in these schools, so that you, the board, are at the beginning of all of these decisions. And then, people go off and do their jobs and you don't know all the minutia and even one of what they're doing every day. But that philosophical beginning could start with a shared service approach. I think in 2 to 3 years, the degree of change that's likely coming should have happened and stabilized. And at that point, there is a real opportunity to look a lot like another multi-school district around our size. You've got among the 3 schools about 1,350 students. There are very similar sized districts around here that have one special ed director and a team chair or team leader in each school. And that's it, that's the structure. And again, we've got a lot to do. So I think keeping a director and an associate director for the first 2 or 3 years to do that work and support staff and do a lot of professional development, which is what I think is important. But then, I think there's a next step, and I think it comes relatively quickly in this area, 2 or 3 years.
We did an audit for IT are you having any thoughts about recommending an audit for special education?
I don't know who we would bring in,
Yeah.
right? If consultants exist in IT, it's kind of easy.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be happy to.
It looks like, you know, one of the first jobs would just be that consistency piece between the elementary schools and then the high school, even though it is a different entity, because of the age of kids and the IEP requirements and the special education requirements. But I think that you would want and need more than one person in those first few years. Just looking at some quick highlights, you know, I mean, the number of IEPs that require shared para are very different in each district. That's pretty clear, along with a few other sort of flags.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think that's a good plan. It's a big job, I think, having, you know, a few people. I don't know who you would bring in, Pam. It's not a bad idea, but it is.
You know, we did it in Concord this year. We transitioned between special education directors. But we ended up having 5 different organizations come in and do the audit together.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, School Administrators Association, Special Education Association, Jen was part of it, but focused on one area of it. We had, I can't remember who all it was, but we had different experts. You know, some were looking at behavior, some were looking at our IEP process, some were looking at, you know, classroom supports and that kind of thing. So they couldn't really find one person to do everything, but it is a much larger district too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
I mean, we do have, the 2 directors we employ both came here from having already been directors in multi-school districts.
Yeah.
So they're pretty seasoned, both of them. We also, it just made me think of this, the interim we had here for a year during the beginning of COVID was also very seasoned, very experienced, and he's retired anyway.
I would have an intention with her to roll that into.
She wanted about 6 months off, and we've stayed in touch since then.
I would
But
support-
sometimes just having new people come in, yeah,
Yeah. I would
especially if they're used to kind of cleaning
Yeah,
things up.
that's what's, you know, I would support having it be in-house, because I think if you go with, somebody who hasn't been here, the learning curve would be tough, especially, you know, especially it's tough.
I think we've been making progressively, kind of gradually, some changes at the high school. So we all kind of feel like, okay, we have a plan, things are moving forward. We're, you know, each year we've sort of mapped out, okay, here's the next thing, and it's going. Annual review meetings, you wouldn't see either the director or associate director in annual review meetings. That's something that our teacher case manager should be able to handle, especially with a team chair for the high school. Should never have to send a director into an annual meeting. You know, initial evals and re-evals, I think you would find at the elementary level that at least the associate director was in all of them. And of course, there are going to be some where the director would go in. That happens in any district.
Right. And it's in other districts.
Right. Yeah, complex cases.
Score update?
3-0, bottom of the first.
Good guess?
Ella is in a triple, basically.
So this makes me a little nervous, just because I'm not in education, I don't really know the ins and outs and the whys and the whats. But some concerns that were brought to our attention, surrounding the assessments in particular, was that who's going to be performing them going forward, and are they really qualified to do so? And would we have to purchase multiple licenses for the system, whatever it is that they use?
So we haven't gotten to it yet, but the next area in the blue presentation is psychology services. So currently, talking about. Which page is that? Sorry. Yeah.
It's not page number.
Two, yes. So academic testing is performed by the teachers, the case managers at Alton Central School. That didn't used to be the case, but when Alton's current director of special education went to work there, she trained the teachers in how they do it. At the high school, it is a combination. The contract school psychologists have been doing it and providing professional development for the teacher case managers who are in the process of taking it over. I would anticipate the same thing would happen at Barnstead, where prior to 4 years ago, the teachers did do academic testing, and then for the last 4 years they have not. But due to turnover, I think that there would be significant professional development before we expected teachers to jump back into that role, and that new teachers who have never been in it, we certainly wouldn't throw them right into that. So,
Just to be clear, we're just talking about the
academic
testing,
testing,
not
just, that's
psychological,
what
not the
psych testing.
psychoeducational.
Yep, academic testing. So if you go to the blue sheets, blue presentation, and psychology services, this one's a little bit different than the others where we have FTE, we have full-time or full-time equivalent positions. Now this one's different because at Alton we have the equivalent of a 3-day-a-week employee, but it's not an employee, it's a contracted service. At the high school, we have the equivalent of 2 days a week, but same thing, it's a contracted service, and a full-time employee at Barnstead. We have an initial quote, we need to do procurement in order to make it right, we need to follow our procurement policies. But you're also allowed to go and get quotes for the purposes of budgeting. And we have an initial quote that includes not only the psych testing, but academic testing and professional development to teach teachers how to do the academic testing. So I think we've built it in well.
So and just to be clear, can I just?
Yeah, please, you're the pro.
So when a student is evaluated or reevaluated, the core testing that is done, it would be a cognitive test, which would be the psychologist would do. And that's the one where you want the psychologist to do it because it is looking at not only the full-scale IQ, but the subtests of the verbal processing and working memory and things like that. So you really do need a trained and licensed psychologist, or school psychologist. There's different variations, it's all fine. As opposed to the academic, which is purely looking at the student's ability in really the core areas of reading, math, and writing with a few subtests. And that is something that, as a case manager with training, they should be able to not only conduct, but provide a reasonable report. But just to sort of qualify why we need the psychological services.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so you just, I don't know if people are well versed in it or not.
That's really helpful, thank you.
Yeah.
So there are two ways that multi-school districts seem to approach, because one thing we haven't talked too much about is counseling services. There are two ways that schools seem to approach psychological testing and counseling. The more common way is to have school social workers, licensed social workers in schools to provide most counseling, or counselors, school counselors, guidance counselors. We have both in all 3 schools, a social worker in each school and guidance counselors in each school. So it is more common, it's not the only way, I'll tell you the other way, but it is more common to find fewer school psychologists in a multi-school system, but many social workers or school counselors. I did find a couple of interesting districts that are kind of the other way around, which I thought was a little bit curious, but it's more common to find it this way. Fewer psychologists who focus on testing, and more of the behavioral and social and emotional support schools coming from about where we are, and school counselors, guidance counselors are generally on teacher scale, even if they're not in teachers associations, even if they're not in unions, the salaries tend to be
Well,
about the same.
guidance counselors often teach classes too, about general health, different choices, you know, all of that. School, the psychologists usually contract as opposed to being there full time. In a high school, you need guidance counselors to be separate from the social workers because they have so many, you know, like letters of recommendation, they have to go through all of that process in the high school. So in the elementary, the guidance people can take on the role of social worker as in counseling. You can have that piece also. But you're proposing contracting.
We can contract all of them, yeah.
I would sort of say contracting with psych services would be very good.
So just another example, if you look at the comparison sheet, we're doing roughly 50 evals a year in each elementary school, and maybe half that number here at the high school, roughly. So our current director of special education here at the high school previously worked in either Reading or Peabody, Mass, a system with 7 schools or something like that, 6 or 7 psychologists who did 100 evaluations a year each. But that's what they did. So, you know, there's just this opportunity for efficiency.
Right, I agree.
And the cost impact is about $66,000 savings a year. So if you look at everything we've talked about so far, and again, this is about services, it's not about just about the money, but you've got to answer to everybody, right? Folks who want to know about quality of education and services, and folks who want to know how much the school budget will be next year. So there's a possibility here to reduce 5.5 positions, some of which are already vacant, most of which are already vacant, and roughly $250,000. The first estimate was conservative. I told you it was conservative. But this is all a little bit inexact because it does make some assumptions about benefits, particularly health care, right? And that's a tough one. It's hard to know for sure where we're going to land. But it's not going to cost more. That's very clear.
My only thought is I'm feeling a little sensitive about retaining people and, you know, the number of people who left of losing. So I just want to make sure that people feel supported, like they're not going to get bombarded with a plate of things that they didn't have previously without the support to get through it. It's just touching people.
I think it's important, you're right. Yeah. It's important.
Anytime there's a lot of change, it's really difficult, yeah.
Yeah, people jumping ship already.
People always jump when there's changes.
Yeah.
But I think it speaks to like being approached as far as baby steps.
Right.
And can we eventually get to one person overseeing the director's role? Yeah. But I think we would be setting them up for failure if we said let's do it now just because of the savings piece.
Yeah.
I'll keep going.
Curriculum.
So this, as I recall, this was the joint board's holy grail when you started talking about shared services, is would there ever be an opportunity to look at curriculum alignment across the system and vertically from preschool to post-secondary programs? So 6 months ago, I wouldn't have told you we were going to be having this conversation, right? But here we are with more areas of potential change, again, than I would have guessed 6 months ago. But if we move forward, you could certainly do it. What does system-wide curriculum leadership provide? Well, first of all, an opportunity to improve student achievement across the system, and particularly to address gaps in literacy, something that I think Jay has probably been talking about for years, observing the 9th graders coming to high school every year. An opportunity to take the vision of graduate that's already been articulated here at the high school through the NEASC process, and then work back to what does that mean an 8th grader looks like, and what does that mean a 5th grader looks like, and what does that mean for us in the primary grades? Us, right, the system. And because we're working together now, a greater opportunity to have the expertise we need across the system to help with professional learning in the other schools. So if we find that we're particularly good at using some particular intervention in one of the elementary schools, there's an opportunity to take it to the other, to learn from each other. And then to me, this is a huge one. I have noticed, as you are 3 years in a row, you're a new superintendent, right? New at the high school, new in Barnstead, new in Alton, that although there is some data floating around, there is not a coherent, regular system of assessment and data analysis that drives all of our decisions, which is really how it should be. And that doesn't exist in any of these 3 schools, really. Not to the degree that I would.
And then the interventions that come after the assessments is really what makes the difference, the interventions.
So as you know, we did post an anticipated opening to find out what we would get for either a director of curriculum instruction and assessment or possibly an assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction and assessment. We had 16 responses and conducted 4 initial interviews. I would be interested, if you are, in bringing back 3 of those candidates to talk with myself, a couple of other administrators, and maybe the chairs of the 3 boards. No quorum or meeting issues with that. And we talked to those 3 people. This is not an area, everything else we've talked about, we've just been talking so far. I'd like to make some decisions if you're willing to. But this is not an area where that's necessary. We're talking to people who are qualified and who are seasoned and who have jobs. So even if we move forward, we're not looking at somebody for July 1st, okay? So we've got time. And I think that's the right way, if we're gonna do this, is to take time.
So the people you've interviewed are for the curriculum or for assistant?
So it's one posting.
Okay.
And the only reason we included, I think we phrased it as growth potential that includes possible assistant superintendent or something like that. It was to try to encourage people to apply who were qualified.
Sure, right.
We didn't want to limit the field, just to find out if there would be interest, and there is. So, you know, this is really.
So there's potential for assistant as opposed to.
Yeah, I think among the 3 people we have both.
Okay.
Regardless of the title, that if we go that direction, would their job duties be the same?
Pretty close, but no. We have to tailor the draft job description, which is the one thing I don't think I gave you again tonight. I might have given it to you last time.
The assistant would have to do the.
The assistant would have to.
Curriculum leader.
Yes, I would really want to see the difference between them and making that decision.
Well, a lot of it's about the right person, because somebody who's a curriculum leader in another school district is likely not going to make a move unless it's an assistant superintendent position. You know, it's an upwards move as opposed to a lateral.
Or you know, an experienced principal looking at the
balancing
district.
whether we're hiring for what our needs are versus what we need to attract. Somebody said, I mean, that there's a difference.
So-
I would imagine with 3 schools, having 3 budgets and 3 summer meetings, like, it seems like it would make sense to have an assistant superintendent. So, for instance, tonight we had a very important meeting in Barnstead, and we also had this board meeting. It would provide some opportunity
degree of everything, right? Some of those were part-time roles, and there are certain areas that just weren't really happening in any of the three schools. You know, in terms of grants administration, we still have a ways to go. Some of that would fall to this person. Title I is another one. It's very inconsistent across the system, and in terms of effectiveness, again, because there isn't that recursive process of looking at achievement data and then questioning, you know, what does that tell us about what we've been doing, it's really difficult to gauge how effective those dollars are. Right? That's part of this role. And of course, curriculum, just plain old curriculum. Each school is in a different place. You know, Jay's been here for a long time and has done a good job leading this school with regards to curriculum development, which is great, but it doesn't help him influence the children who walk through the door.
Well, I
in the
think
fall.
that's what must be the biggest challenge, of getting kids from two different districts coming in with different curriculum. You know, it's a huge challenge. So if we had a person to help coordinate that, I think that would make a big difference to all of the kids.
And that's where I see the title of Assistant Superintendent sort of sending that message that it is not just the elementary schools or not just the high school, but all preschools.
It's a vision now.
And it makes sense that you couldn't have it before, but you used to have 6 people, 3 superintendents and 3 business administrators to do 3 budgets. Heidi and I can do 3 budgets, right? You've seen that now.
Right.
We can do 3 budgets. So now there's this opportunity for this thing that you couldn't have before, right? Because each system by itself just couldn't justify it.
And we're also seeing how much is on your plates this year, especially for the first time, you know.
I agree.
So I'll make a motion that the former committee of the 3 chairs from the schools, along with appropriate to be on there for interviewing for the process for assistant superintendent, to bring forward a name or 2 names, whatever it is, to the full joint board for us to take a look at.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? All right.
Do we need some motions on the other positions?
I think it might be good just to cover some bases.
But I can tell you what would be handy.
Okay.
If you want to wait until you get to personnel, we could do it then.
Sure, whatever,
Okay.
whatever
Yeah,
is
whatever
gonna
works.
work for you.
I have one other topic in my report tonight. And it's a single sheet of paper at the back of the rest of all of this. We have 5 school year employees here at the high school who do not qualify for Category 1 benefits, but are also not covered by the paraprofessional CBA, which means that their benefits availability does not include dental insurance, even if they pay for it entirely themselves. So would you consider either, 1, offer them dental under the same terms that the paraprofessionals have, which would mean that the board would pay the full cost of a single person plan, but the employee would pay the difference between a single person plan and a 2-person or family plan, or simply say to these 5 people, well, you don't have the board paying toward dental insurance as one of your benefits, but you're allowed to buy it if you want to at your own cost. Without your action, we can't offer it to them even under those terms.
If we went option 1, is there money to even cover that in the budget? Will we take a hit?
I would like to offer it to them
Yeah,
I do too, I'm supposed to get off of one of this.
with,
It's not that expensive?
under the same terms as paraprofessionals.
Second your motion.
Dental insurance is
No,
No,
it's not.
No,
change
those are
that
very
much,
low
and
cost,
we need
yeah.
to keep good people.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. So I just want to make sure it was a fortune.
It's just plain fair.
Yes, and it's fair. It's the
Yeah.
right thing to do.
Same with long-term disability. Do you want to roll that in?
Yes.
Oh,
It's a
oh.
different story, just with long-term disability.
So we got a motion and a second on the first one.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I have a question about, just to make sure there's no conflict in how we handle teachers' contract, and those teachers who are not under the CBA.
All teachers are under the
All
CBA.
teachers are covered.
So we don't, how about what we offer other
Yeah,
admins?
so administrators get category 1 benefits, which includes dental. So this is a tiny little, it's 5 employees, they just kind of fall into this crack here.
I just wanna make sure.
Where
So
they,
they're the
they
only
only, they're,
people in
they,
school.
I don't mean only, but they work during the school year, they don't work year round. But they're not paraprofessionals, so
I
they don't
just wanna
fall
make sure
into
we're
that.
not creating discrepancies.
There are 5.
As I, testing my memory here, but everybody is offered the single plan. And then if they want additional plans, they have to pay the difference.
Everybody except for these 5 people.
I
Yes.
meant,
Yes.
everybody that now gets dental insurance gets a single plan.
Yes, they can opt into the single plan, yes.
So, all right, any further questions on that? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Long-term
So
disability?
I'm sorry, I made you keep this separate, because
That's all
it's a little different. So I'm not the expert at the table on long-term disability insurance, but I know a little. So generally, in my experience, long-term disability insurance means that if an employee goes out of work due to a long-term illness or injury for a period that exceeds 90 days, then starting as soon as day 91, that employee could receive what, again, in my experience, amounts to 2/3 of their salary, but tax-free, which for most employees comes out to about what they take home anyway. It is the best deal in insurance. It's generally really inexpensive. Again, my experience, most employees, if they elected to do this through payroll deduction at their own expense, no cost borne by the district, they're going to spend $4 to $10 a pay period or something like that on this kind of insurance. The only cost that you could imagine is the cost of administration, which we can handle. So I think personally this is one of the best things you can offer at on an employee paid basis. It doesn't have to cost you any money. But again, we can't offer a benefit without you wanting to and voting to offer the benefit.
Most of those employees to long-term care disability.
This should be everybody.
Everybody.
This should be everybody.
This is offering.
Yeah, nobody has this now.
Good, perfect, for everybody.
Second.
It's a race, easy peasy.
Will this be proposed at the other board meetings as well?
See you next week.
Okay. This has been a long time coming, I have to say. This has been a long time coming.
Been discussed, but I never understood.
Yeah, you've had a
Why
lot.
have we never offered
Yeah.
this before?
Yeah, yeah.
It's cheap.
A no-brainer. And you're taking care of your employees when they're an illness that warrants 90 days or greater.
Yeah.
And also, if you look back at some of your collective bargaining agreements, you have caps on sick day accumulation, some of them at 90 days. Others are higher. You may want to roll that back, and this would be a good argument for why that makes sense, right? 90 days of accumulation of sick time would allow somebody to be paid sick leave up until qualifying for LTD.
Who was the carrier that you were looking at? Was it Sunlight?
I've worked with Sun in the past, but we would go out, we would do a competitive process, issue an RFP.
All right, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you for doing this. I think this is really important.
So that's my report.
All right, hold on, let me reorient myself here to the agenda.
Driver's education.
Driver's education contract. So we have a bid from Jack's Driving School.
So is this comparable to other driving schools? I mean, is it much higher to go elsewhere? I have no idea.
I think we've tried.
No, I don't mean.
You can't get
if
the bid.
kids- if
We've only
kids go-
received one. Oh, is it comparable?
Like if kids
Yes.
go to Concord instead of.
It's a little, it's more expensive than what we paid going to Concord, but that was before the gas prices went so far up, so I bet it's
This
pretty,
is a lot higher than it was before.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, he's kind of outlined the fuel charges.
Right, I was just curious,
So just the
if
base
it's
wage.
Wolfboro, would they be paying about the same, you know?
Yeah, they'll have to go.
So the advantage of having this contract is simply that they cover the cost. As
It's
opposed
a
to the
locational
cost.
advantage.
The location, not the cost.
So you're not driving to Concord at 7 a.m. on Saturdays for
It
that
really
truck.
just means we can't, we wouldn't have someone else come here, but.
No, I know that we have, yeah.
I'll make a motion, so we can talk about, make a motion to accept Jack's Driving School LLC's bid as presented.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, she just said.
Okay.
She said very
Any
well.
further discussion?
This is only for the
1 year.
1 year.
It's a tough decision. I'm not gonna lie to you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's our only bid, right?
Yeah. Any opposed?
No.
You're a no?
No, I said aye.
Okay. All right. End of your surplus, proposed encumbrances, so you have a packet from Heidi, like this.
The finance committee did make some adjustments to this.
Okay.
Under item number 1, in talking with Heidi, we thought that we could use 10,000 from Fund 5, which is the money that we receive for the use of the building. So we'd like to reduce that amount in item number 1 to 12,000 to be encumbered. And then, the utility vehicle, we had a lot of discussion about that, and I believe there was only one bid. And the actual amount for the vehicle itself should be $13,296. And then we talked about item number 3, that's speakers for the gymnasium. They have a plug-and-play type situation now, so, or something like that. But there are no speakers there, so that would be important for both games and for gym classes. Item number 4, we talked quite a bit about, and where we ended up was not, when we discussed it, it was $500. What we were told, it was $500 for full-time, $250 for part-time, and $1,500 for certain administrators. And what we changed to bring to the board was $500 each, no distinction. And so that amount would be changed to $53,287. Item number 5, they're still working on getting the bids, so that's really an estimate, and it's both for SPED training as far as taking SPED students out to learn, make it easier for them to learn life skills, and also because it's a 10-passenger fees for small field trips for certain, small clubs or whatever. So, and then item number 6 is because we don't ever budget for teacher professional development or their tuition that they're granted under their contract, because we have a capital reserve fund. And we usually cover those expenses what that amount is. So the new total should be 195,576 if you approve these items.
Make a motion to approve these items as adjusted.
Second.
Any discussion?
I will note that the finance committee had a lot of discussion. We decided we weren't recommending this. We felt the full board should talk about the items because
Yeah, we voted to bring it to the full board because we had a lot of discussion about this list.
we made these changes, but we aren't necessarily recommending all of it.
Well, I'd like to change and make for $500 equally across the board. 'Cause
Yeah,
I work,
me too.
I work for accounting, and I make a lot more than my other people. They distribute it equally, you know. They do work, they're people boots on the ground, so I think that's a great change. Just my personal
I
opinion.
agree.
I agree.
We talked about utility vehicle in buildings and grounds.
Yeah,
And
we
Andy
did.
has some good reasoning for wanting it. I don't know if the finance committee was.
Yeah, I think it's the thing is we didn't have a lot of backup for any of this, so it was some.
And he talked about the.
And the
We
van.
talked a lot about the van for,
Yeah. Yeah, we did.
for,
That's a
for
great idea.
golf clubs. I did, school I taught at for a while. The golf team, we used actually the small van, that kind of stuff, saved the bus money. Small trips, special ed, taking people for job shadowing or for jobs in the community. So a lot of things you can save instead of getting a junk bus, especially with gas prices, those kinds of things,
I
the
love
small
that,
little
yeah.
moves. So that's what we talked about, buildings and grounds.
And it would be really nice to use it for the golf team if it's available, because I think our experience was, you know, those younger students don't have a ride to Farmington to practice. They're not practicing here, they're practicing
And we
half
use
an
it
hour
for,
away.
like my county and stuff, we keep the van and like here for teachers to go to workshops. If there's 4 or 5 you're going to the same place instead of paying 4 or 5 mileage.
Yeah.
And that's part of our policies that we did change. You come and share the van. Yeah, you want to go on your own, then when you come to the school and share a ride, you pay for yourself. I'm not saying that change the policy, but it is some savings if you go that route. So there's a lot of things.
That contact stops, because we're just
The UTV does seem like a pretty reasonable price in the grand scheme of UTVs.
Well, she said she
And it's
had
actually a replacement.
5 or 6 places in the city all over the place.
They're, yeah, they're non-existent.
And they're very, I can't remember because it was a month ago, but I think he said that that would bring a labor savings too, like using the ATV would be faster than
Yeah.
how they're.
Yeah, the ATV is junk. They want the special piece of equipment to actually do it would be too much money. This is actually a kind of a compromise. The special piece of equipment was a lot of money to do the fields. This is a lot less cost. So he could have gone a different route, came with that piece of machinery, one that cost him 10 grand. It was a lot.
Yeah.
If they did the specific machinery, so this is a compromise to be able to do the same thing they need and a ton of man hours to do it.
Specific machinery for what?
Fields, screwing fields, especially in fields and those kinds of things.
But he said something about trash too, like you can use it for other stuff.
Yeah, pick up the trash, but it's a lot for in fields.
Well, this is
Cheap
a
ways.
replacement, right? This is to replace what we have?
They'll keep the old one, but it doesn't run very well. It's antiquated, it's not reliable, it's on its way out the door.
I support that use.
Me too.
Yeah, I do too.
So is the motion still on the floor, or?
Yep.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
One thing I forgot to add to the, or talk about finance committee swap was, we've got a proposal from, Amy from Heidi to actually increase the lunch prices. So, she's recommending that we increase it to $3.30.
What is it currently?
$3.10. But many students or parents won't.
Unless
know
you
that
don't qualify for free or reduced lunch.
Because we haven't been paying.
The food prices I've seen jacked up pretty high because of everything that's going on.
But they use the,
This is for the PLE tool that is required when you're applying for a federal help. It's suggesting that we
further discussion?
Everybody to
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? They have been free for the last, what, 2 years?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's such a,
That's all,
yeah, I just think that should be.
And families can still apply for free and reduced lunch, you know, if it's a hardship.
And everybody realizes that everything's going up. So.
Yeah. All right, so we are on to personnel. So we have resignations and retirement, if somebody wants to.
I make a motion to accept the resignation of Tim Rubio for IT supervisor.
Tom Rubino.
Thanks.
Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Second.
Uh,
All those in favor? Aye.
Make a motion for resignation for Sheriff Patterson. Resources retirement. You guys want to be so specific.
We hear it.
With
With regrets.
regrets, absolutely. Thank you for your service, Sharon. We have a second?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor?
Make a motion for a new hire.
Can we group them together?
Glenn Reed and Shonda Hopkins. We're both from new hires.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right, so we have the shared services positions.
So it's kind of a what's your pleasure situation. I would like to nominate two for sure. So as our director of facilities for the 2 elementary schools, I'd like to nominate Sean Asdot. He'll work a full-time year-round 260-day contract at a proposed salary of $74,160.
Make a motion to hire Sean Asdod, facility director for Barnstead and Alton Elementary Schools.
Second?
Is that the, rate that is, that's right?
Yeah, we just tried to find as many Lakes region multi-school district or systems as possible to find comparable salaries.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Same thing with Sam Allen, nominate him as the shared service director for the 2 elementary schools. He will increase to a 210-day contract at a salary of $70,818.
What's the last name?
Allen?
Allen, C-O-W-A-N.
Okay. Appointment of Sam, whatever you said last
Cowan?
name. For food service director for Barnstead Elementary and Alton Elementary School. You like that?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
So one thing we will owe you now, we talked about this last month, is Heidi and I will bring you at your August meeting a proposed division of cost for this, because this is a new one, right? The 2 elementary schools, but not the high school. So we have all the tools in the toolbox, but we'll bring it to you and kind of show you the whole, here's how it works, and you'll have a chance to make sure that you're happy with that, okay? Because this is new, right? We're doing a new thing with these 2 positions. With IT and special ed, I think I need you to talk to each other about what you're comfortable with. Do you want to give me some authority? Do you want to set parameters? Do you want me to tell you what I think those parameters should be? Or, you know, with IT, I couldn't do it tonight. If you twisted my arm, I could with special ed, but it would be, I would say, a little premature. So I'd rather have a mechanism for doing it that we could establish tonight.
I'll make a motion to get superintendent authority to hire IT and special education director along the lines that was presented today to our group, because everybody saw shaking their heads. So.
We change that to positions.
Positions.
Yeah, there's multiple positions.
Second. I think it'll be important because we're not in July.
Yeah, we need to
Right.
get moving on those. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Also make a motion for the superintendent to hire positions as needed over the course of the summer until we have our meetings.
Yeah, so teachers or.
Teachers, paras.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
That includes coaches, though.
Before you wrap up personnel, we have just a couple of salaries still to set for next year here at SAU 301. At your last meeting, you covered our non-union folks in the guidance office, Mr. Carloni, Ms. Daniels, Ms. Felker. For our social worker, Lori Raymond, I'd like to propose, this is the third step in a three-step process that I described to you a year ago. Another $5,000 adjustment. I know it's a lot, it's been a lot each time. That'll take that social worker's salary from $64,933 up to $69,833. Comparables for the position with her education and length of service are between 70 and 72.
Sure,
You'll remember this situation if you were here last year. It was a little bit tragic. So that is a request for your action. And then I have two others.
You got the first one again, though. What was that?
Social worker.
Social worker, $5,000.
So we might make a motion to.
I make a motion to increase the social worker pay of $5,000, as recommended by the superintendent.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
We have an administrative assistant part-time in the guidance office. Who very sheepishly came to us recently to inform us that one of her teenage children had gone out and gotten a part-time job making more money per hour than we pay her. Her current wage is $16.17 per hour, and I propose a $1 per hour adjustment to $17.66. And looking at our support staff CBAs where we have them in the other schools, 17 to 19 is where we're paying.
I make a motion to increase the admin assistant pay in the guidance office by $1, as recommended by the superintendent.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I might have said two more, but I still have two more. A month ago, we did not propose and you did not act on the reappointment of Mr. Callahan, our Director of Buildings and Grounds for the high school. I propose a 1.5% increase to $71,802.
Make a motion to, first of all, reappoint Andy Callahan, and with a, how much?
1.5%.
1.5% increase.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Any discussion
Oh.
for future looking where, our director for the high school, one school is at a commensurate salary, very close to the salary of the director for the two elementary schools, so at some point we're going to have to address that.
So this is the second year that you've seen me come to you with a lower than typical recommended increase for this director's salary, and that's exactly why. It's not because he doesn't do an adequate job, but it's just a little out of whack. And finally, for those of you who don't know, I believe that our high school principal is entering the final year of his contract. And I'm going to propose that, first of all, I need to meet with Jay and do a review. But I'm going to want to act on that prior to December of next year, maybe even a lot sooner than that, maybe even when I see you in August or September. I don't like administrators going into their last years who are typically on term of his contract, probably early next fall. Frankly, if we'd had time, I'd be doing it right now. Sorry, Jay. But in light of the cost of living, I think a lower than 3% adjustment doesn't make a lot of sense because prices of everything have gone up. So a 3% adjustment for Jay's salary, he's been here a long time, for next year we're at 122,431, and that's what I propose.
Make a motion for that. Well, I'll make a motion for a 3% pay increase for Jay Fitzpatrick, cost of living increase as recommended by the superintendent.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Finished with personnel. All right, we are at our second public input. Do we have any public input? No? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public input. Future agenda items.
I'm going to bring you a proposal at your August 2nd meeting with a presentation either from our school nurse or SRO or Jay or myself to talk about allowing the SROs and the school nurse to have Narcan in the school. It is something that I think this board has previously discussed and been opposed to, but we'll spend time talking about it before we ask you to make any kind of decision.
I've actually brought it up before about Narcan not putting it in the school.
You have an existing request to talk about ski club for next year, but we thought we could put that off. Knowing that tonight was likely to be a long meeting, I'll bring you the 5-year capital plan revision prior to taking it to NECIP meetings on August 2nd.
I'd like to add a request for future agenda item that the administration brings us information about how students are educated about the anti-fraternization policy. Because I think that's something that's necessary beyond handing out in the handbook, student handbook. So I'd like to understand what's being done now and what we can do.
Okay. We do have a non-public session, so
That's under.
somebody.
You said legal?